Welcome back. It's time for the Sky Garden, a dungeon seemingly based on the legend of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. Except in this case, they're the Flying Gardens of Babylon. The dungeon is divided up into 4 distinct quadrants. They aren't interconnected in the slightest. Each one has 1 crystal ball to find. Once we have all 4, we can place them in the floor here to form a bridge that takes us to the boss. There's also a really cool gimmick to this dungeon, which we'll see later. First enemy we encounter is this bomb worm. Its most distinguishing feature is that upon its inevitable demise, it explodes into 7 pieces, all of which then fall to the ground and explode. In this way, it can harm us from beyond the grave. These blue golems are pretty much non-threatening. They can fire lasers and shoot their fists at us, but those attacks are easily blocked or dodged, and the golems themselves are easily taken out by 1 Psycho Dash, provided that we start it from the correct distance. One of the distinguishing features of the Hanging Gardens of Babylon is that they were a very tall multi-tiered structure, and you'll see a lot of that in this dungeon. There's lots of stairs and multiple levels. Of course, it doesn't stop with just stairs. You don't have to have multiple levels just by stacking them all on top of each other. I mean, why just bother stacking up when you can also go down and upside down and just shit on gravity all day? That's right. You actually explore this dungeon from top to bottom, literally. When you jump off the top, you come back around to the bottom, and miraculously you're still attached to it and not falling to the ground. In fact, it's almost like a certain other Super Nintendo RPG that has a light world and a dark world that resemble each other, but not quite. What was that called? Oh yeah, Metroid Prime Echoes. Wait. No, A Link to the Past, that's the one. Heading back over to the front end brings us to a treasure chest, and a statue with a sword on it. The key to moving these statues, or rather giant suits of armor, is to hit them first to wake up the sword, then hit the sword 3 times to defeat it. It doesn't count as an enemy, and it doesn't have a life bar, and it doesn't count towards powering up. But what it does count toward is being able to move that statue with telekinesis, as we did there to get the first crystal ball. But we're not quite done here yet. There are 2 more chests to pick up before we move on to the next section. This one just has an herb, which, if I wasn't confident that I wasn't going to die, I might consider using now. Of course, now that would be completely pointless. Well, it appears that I've neglected a part of here. You'll find that the bottom of the Sky Garden is actually identical to the top, except mirrored. This will come into play a little bit more later. Of course, the back also has a lot of these narrow passageways that are great for killing enemies with your special abilities, as you can see here. The freeze frame here reveals an interesting detail in the explosions. There's faces in them, like tormented souls are exploding out of the enemy as it dies. It's a really cool detail, and not one that you see very often. And the last chest, of course, I could have gotten earlier, but might as well get it on the way back. It is a red jewel. Not difficult at all to find. Alright, so let's get out of here and head on to our next challenge. Putting the crystal ball into place moves one of the crystal platforms into position to be used as a bridge later. Down here is an animation that's little used in the game. I kinda like it, the edging along a cliff animation. Makes me wish there were more cliffs. This statue is guarding another leap. We haven't seen one of these for a while. Well, there weren't any in the diamond mine. No leaps, anyways. But Will is always living life on the edge, and he's always wanted to try to jump over the desert on a flying garden. It would really suck if he got hit in the middle of that, though. This statue guards a door to a dark space. Now, while we're here, we're going to switch over into Fred. It is in fact necessary. I'm not doing it just because I want to. And in fact, we'll find that switching back and forth becomes more prevalent as we move on in the game. In fact, the next dungeon, well, 2 dungeons from now, makes a point of making it very difficult to do what you want unless you switch properly. Or don't switch properly, as the case may be. Well, I completely whiffed with that Dark Friar. Fortunately, the targets that we're going to need to hit with it are fully stationary. So we won't have that problem down the line. I should note before that the red golems are just a stronger version of the blue golems. They have more life, and their hands, when they shoot them out, can do a little more strange stuff. They like to hang around independent of the actual golem itself. Usually the blue ones just go out and return, even if they're blocked. But sometimes the red golems, their hands, I believe they can survive death and hurt you from beyond the grave, much like the bomb worms. Killing that blue golem is what we actually needed Fred for. None of the other attacks will reach him other than the Dark Friar, and killing him opens the way to the south. Which lets us head back to the back of the garden, where there are more enemies to defeat. Bomb worms can also leap over small barriers, and actually large barriers too. That gives them a bit more of an avenue to hurt you, especially if they do it from off-screen. Those red golems, though, were lined up like a bunch of suckers. Perhaps the most dangerous enemy in the Sky Garden isn't really an enemy at all. It's those chains of fire. The dungeon designers happen to put them in very narrow passages where they're difficult, if not impossible, to avoid. They're not super damaging, but they do a lot of damage over time in a very short amount of time. I stood on one for about half a second, and it did 2 full damage to me, regardless of my defense. That makes them a little more dangerous than I'd like. And I'll make a point to try to avoid them, and then I won't avoid them at all because they're very precariously placed. In any case, that's all we need to do here in the second quadrant, so let's go put the crystal ball in its place, watch Frieden slide along that edge like a boss, and get on with it. That's 2 down, 2 to go. In this section, we finally see the back of the garden influence the front of the garden. It's basically like the light world influencing the dark world. While this is very prevalent in Metroid Prime Echoes and Darkseid, Link to the Past didn't really have a lot of dark world affecting light world. There was a segment where you brought somebody from the dark world to the light world, but other than that, I can't think of any instance where a change in one directly affects the other. So let's get a red jewel. And then, let's get with the effecting. When we hit that switch, pillars pop up here. And those same pillars disappear on the front side of the garden. That switch on the right is a trap. If you hit it, it does the same thing as hitting this switch, except now you can't get back. Now remember that when you go to the back side of the garden, it's not just the same layout, it's the same layout but mirrored. It's entirely possible to get stuck because you go to the right looking for a pathway to be open, but in fact it was here to the left all along. The blue fireball chains are nowhere near as threatening as the red ones. Least of which reason being that there's a lot more room to maneuver around them, and there's far fewer of them. Now up there is a dark space hidden by pillars. We need Fred to help us access it, because we need to get Will back if we want the crystal ball up here, up this ramp. To get up there, we'll need to take a running start from a very long distance away, and that's why we're going to need Will, as you'll see shortly. Unlike enemies, the Dark Friar only hits that switch once, which is very useful. Now, why would we need Will back? It obviously has to be because of his special ability, the Psycho Dash. It's the only ability he has right now that Frieden can't also do. So to get to the treasure chest, we need to do two things. We need to get these statues out of the way, and we need to get that cluster of pillars out of the way as well, so that when we take a running start, we go all the way across. Oh, there's that fire chain again, heading up into a narrow area where it's difficult to avoid. As you can see, the hands of the golem survived the golem's demise and hurt me. Of all the actual enemies, the red golems are the most dangerous. Fortunately, they can't retract the fists anymore after they're dead. Now this statue is off in a very odd locale. I wonder why that is. Aha! There's a switch. And apparently the golem wasn't heavy enough to press it. And if the golem's not heavy enough, then Will isn't heavy enough either. So we're going to need to drag this statue all the way over here onto the tile. And when we do, that cluster of pillars that was blocking our way descends into the back of the garden, leaving the path wide open. Well, almost wide open. We have to take out the statues again. But that's no big deal. I really like running long distances like that. Okay, 3 down, 1 more to go. Getting out of here can be a little tricky if you don't remember exactly which paths opened when you killed which enemies. There's a very straight and clear path back to the start, but you might not remember. Oh, and I forgot to show off there's a dark space in the hub as well. However, it doesn't let you transform, and is thus only useful for topping off before you take on the boss. Oh, and I guess saving in between segments if you think you're gonna die. But you know, if you think you're gonna die, that's why you have all those herbs. You can use them. No one's gonna think less of you. Except for me. Alright, so our first challenge in the last quadrant of the Sky Garden is to remember the controls of the game. That's right, you can change the direction you're running while you're running by holding diagonal in the direction that you are currently running. It's pretty cool and it doesn't really come up that often, but when it does, you'll probably forget about it. This area doesn't do us any good right now, but it will when we're coming back. Now this ramp is a bit of a trap. If you go running all the way like you really feel like you want to, then you'll hit that second jump and be taken all the way back to the start and have to travel all the way back through this area. The ticket is to stop in the middle so that you can come here to the back side of the garden again, where there are even more enemies. You know, this area has a lot of enemies, but it only ramps up as you go further. That's a heck of a leap from that one worm. And this guy joins him, too. Again, I'm running low on life, partially due to carelessness, and partially due to taking damage to save time. Yes, I know it's not a race to the finish, but, you know, after you play so many races to the finish, it just gets stuck in your head. In any case, once again, we're not changing to Fred just because I want to fight the boss with him. We actually need him to finish off this area of the Sky Garden. But it's not like I'm going to switch back, because I do want to use him for the boss. The extremely trivial boss. Now once again, the reason we need Fred is that there's something that has to be hit with the Dark Friar that Will cannot, with any amount of jump slashing. Specifically, we have to shoot this statue so that the sword wakes up. Dragging him over to the plate removes that statue from our way. Just a few more enemies left, and they're all very clustered together. As you can see, there are 2 treasure chests left. One contains an herb, which isn't so useful, and the other contains the final crystal ball. Personally, I would have rather liked another red jewel. Now remember that the place is mirrored, so to get to the chest we have to go to the right, so that when we pop back up on the front side of the garden, we'll be heading right. I'm not sure I really understand the point of having enemies up here. In fact, they do it a few times in this particular dungeon. They put enemies somewhere where you actually just don't need to go. Anyways, there's 2 chests and 2 paths that we can take. So once again, we need to use our diagonal running skills. Not like that. Like that. Unfortunately, we've hit the herb first, which means that we're going to have to take another trip around. Of course, I'm going to cut that out. Alright, this time, for real, let's get the last crystal ball. There it is. Alright, all that's left to do is head back to the hub, place the remaining crystal balls, and be on our way. First, we have to undo that little trap with the ramps. Remember this place that was kind of a throwaway and not important? Well, it takes you back here, and now we actually want to fall for the trap and head all the way back to start. I'm kind of upset that statue is in there because I wanted to go madly dashing back into the hub. Alright. We're healed up. We're saved up. Let's finish the bridge. Quick check out our status reveals that we're doing pretty good. Strength 10, Defense 11. I like it. It's pretty good. So let's fight Viper. As soon as we start walking, this bridge falls, and the Sky Garden begins to fall with it. Or at least this section. Viper has 4 attacks. He can fire a small cluster grenade made of feathers while blowing you backwards. He can ram into you. He can fire this ineffective crystal laser. And he can fire those far more effective streams of 6 feathers. I've always wondered if you can actually take too long in this fight and have the guard come crashing to the ground, ending in a loss. But honestly, Viper is so easy that that's not really going to come up. Of course, even though he's dead and we have a second Mystic statue, there's still the little matter that we're falling and going to die. No shit, Neil! If you guessed that the airplane was Neil's invention that was going to save us in the future, you were wrong. Ha ha! Well, maybe you were right. But I couldn't blame you if you didn't think that the airplane was going to come into play, because Neil did say it was a week's walk from his house to the Nazca lines. Except he also said that he hid the airplane in the desert. Which is kind of goofy, but remember what Kara said about the lines being a lot like the lines at an athletic event? Well, Neil probably thought they were like the lines on an airstrip. Despite the fact that he shouldn't know what an airstrip is. Moo is in fact one of the most frustrating video game experiences of my young life. So frustrating that just for thinking about it, Neil's going to crash his plane into the ocean. Fortunately, we've all bailed out. But what awaits us once we splash down? Will it be Moo? Or something else? It's something else.